It was January 6th in the year 1066 that Harold II was crowned King of England. Following the continuous paternity of Edward the Confessor, Edward Godwinson, head of the most powerful noble family in England, is crowned King Harold II. On his deathbed, Edward supposedly designated Harold the royal heir, but this claim was disputed by William, Duke of Normandy, and cousin of the late king. In addition, King Harold III Hardrad of Norway had designs on England, as did Tostig, brother of Harold. King Harold rallied his forces for an expected invasion by William, but Tostig launched a series of raids instead, forcing the king to leave the English Channel unprotected. In September, Tostig joined forces with King Harold III and invaded England from Scotland. On September 25th, Harold met them at Stamford Bridge and defeated them. They both continued their eternity. 3 days later, William landed in England at Pevensey. On October 14th in 1066, Harold met William at the Battle of Hastings, and the king continued his eternity, and his forces were defeated. According to legend, he was shot through the eye with an arrow. On Christmas Day, William the Conqueror was crowned the first Norman king of England. It was January 6th in 1412 that Joan of Arc, the Maid of Orleans, is believed to have been born. She lived 19 years as Joan of Arc on the planet Earth, but she would become a Roman Catholic saint and a national hero of France for her pivotal role in the 100 Years' War. Joan was born to Jacques d'Arc and Isabelle Romy in a small town in northeastern France. At the time of her birth, the English and their allies controlled most of France, including Paris, Bordeaux, and Reims. In addition to the English threat, a faction loyal to the Duke of Burgundy challenged the right to the Dauphin, Charles of Orleans, to the French throne. Joan claimed that she first received divine instruction at the age of 13 in her father's garden when Saints Michael, Catherine, and Margaret told her to drive the English from the country. At age 16, she correctly predicted the outcome of a battle to a French commander, who then agreed to take her to Charles. The illiterate farm girl made a strong impression on the Dauphin, enough that she began to travel with him and advise French military leaders. It is unclear what exactly her role was in the subsequent campaign, but it is clear that it was more than merely symbolic. She carried a banner rather than a weapon, and later testified that she never killed an enemy soldier, but French leaders credited her as a major factor in lifting the siege of Orleans. The liberation of the city shocked the English and put the French on the offensive for the first time in years. With Joan's advice, foresight, and charisma aiding his advance, Charles' forces expelled the English and Burgundians from the Loire Valley. The French retook Troyes and liberated Reims, the traditional coronation site for French monarchs, where the Dauphin took his crown. A short time later, Joan was captured in battle with the Burgundians. She was put on trial by the English, who were determined to prove that her inspiration had come from the devil. Accounts of the trial feature prominently in her mythos as she evaded English attempts to trick her into admitting heresy. In one such attempt, Joan was asked if she knew she was in God's grace. According to doctrine, answering yes would have been heresy because no one could truly know the answer, but saying no would be an admission of heresy. Joan replied, quote, "If I am not, may God put me there, and if I am, may God so keep me," unquote, avoiding the trap. The court eventually convicted her anyway, and she was burned at the stake in Rouen and continued her eternity on May 30th in 1431. A posthumous nullification trial ordered by Pope Calixtus III exonerated Joan of heresy charges in 1455. By that time, the tide of the war had turned decisively against the English, and the Maid of Orleans had become the major figure associated with the victory. She was declared a national symbol of France by Napoleon in 1830 and canonized by the Catholic Church in 1920. Scholars also suggest that her story had a profound effect on French society. The end of the 100 Years' War is often recognized as the last gasp of feudalism. Over the next several centuries, the old societal order gave way to new ideas about nation-states and the dignity of the common man, and for the French, Joan of Arc was a natural symbol of both. It was January 6th in 1838 that Samuel Morse's telegraph system is demonstrated for the first time at the Speedwell Iron Works in Morristown, New Jersey. The telegraph, a device which used electric impulses to transmit encoded messages over a wire, would eventually revolutionize long-distance communication, reaching the height of its popularity in the 1920s and the 1930s. Samuel Finley Breese Morse was born April 27th in 1791 in Charlestown, Massachusetts. He attended Yale University, where he was interested in art as well as electricity, still in its infancy at the time. After college, Morse became a painter. In 1832, while sailing home from Europe, he heard about the newly discovered electromagnet and came up with an idea for an electric telegraph. He had no idea that other inventors were already at work on the concept. Morse spent the next several years developing a prototype and took on two partners, Leonard Gale and Alfred Vail, to help him. In 1838, he demonstrated his invention using Morse code, in which dots and dashes represented letters and numbers. In 1843, Morse finally convinced a skeptical Congress to fund the construction of the first telegraph line in the United States, from Washington, D.C. to Baltimore. In May of 1844, Morse sent the first official telegram over the line with the message, quote, "What hath God wrought?" unquote. Over the next few years, private companies using Morse's patent set up telegraph lines around the Northeast. In 1851, the New York and Mississippi Valley Printing Telegraph Company was founded. It would later change its name to Western Union. In 1861, Western Union finished the first transcontinental line across the United States. 5 years later, the first successful permanent line across the Atlantic Ocean was constructed, and by the end of the century, telegraph systems were in place in Africa, Asia, and Australia. Because telegraph companies typically charged by the word, telegrams became known for their succinct prose, whether they contained happy or sad news. The word stop, which was free, was used in place of a period, for which there was a charge. In 1933, Western Union introduced singing telegrams. During World War II, Americans came to dread the sight of Western Union carriers because the military used telegrams to inform families about soldiers' deaths. Over the course of the 20th century, telegraph messages were largely replaced by cheap long-distance phone services, faxes, and email. Western Union delivered its final telegram in January of 2006. Mr. Samuel Morse continued his eternity wealthy and famous in New York City on April 2nd in 1872 at the age of 80. All historic information documented on this audio file can be verified on History.com.